Hi everybody, this is Deacon Bil from Sacred Heart Parish in La Plata, Maryland. I'm at another parish right now, not too far away from mine. This is St. Ignatius of Hilltop, Maryland, beautiful parish. I could be wrong, but I think I've been told this is the smallest parish in the entire archdiocese, but it's really beautiful here. It's also a beautiful day outside. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning as I speak this to you. But what if somebody comes to me later on in the day and says that the Pope woke up this morning and said, what a beautiful Friday morning it is. Well, it's Tuesday, but he enjoys the grace of papal infallibility. So does that mean we have to change the calendar? Does it mean he's wrong? We're wrong? How does that work? I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what papal infallibility is. It's confused with impeccability, which is something we reserve for the Blessed Mother alone. Infallibility is used in a very narrow set of circumstances when the Pope, when speaking in his authority as the Pope, which is called ex cathedra, is teaching on faith or morals. He invokes this privilege, and he knows that he'll be free from doctrinal error when he teaches it. The last time this was used was 74 years ago, in 1950, when Pope Pius XII declared the Assumption of Mary. And before that, it was 96 years before that, in 1854, when Pius IX declared the Immaculate Conception of Mary. So it's used very, very rarely. But in 1870, the Church had codified that the Pope had this privilege. But it was a long-standing practice in the Church. So it's good to understand what it is and what it is not. We do believe the Pope can make mistakes. In fact, we've had popes in our history which have been bad popes. We've had, the one that comes to mind now is Stephen VI, who took his predecessor's remains, dug them up, his name was Pope Formosus, put him in his papal vestments, put him on a throne and tried him, obviously found him guilty, and then declared his papacy to be completely invalid and threw his remains into the Tiber River in Rome. That's not exactly being a good pope, and that's pretty sinful. So we don't believe that infallibility protects the pope from his personal sin. In fact, all the modern popes have been known to have a regular practice of going to confession to a priest, like the rest of all Catholics. But the best definition or the best defense of the difference between infallibility and impeccability, I think, comes from our Lord himself. If we look in the Gospel of Matthew, I'm going to read a little bit here. When they're in Caesarea Philippi, and Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, who do people say that I am? Well, they give him the wrong answers. They say, well, some say that you're John the Baptist or Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And he says, okay, but who do you say that I am? And then Peter, whom we recognize as the first pope, steps up and says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus recognizes that no man could have told him this, but only God in heaven could have told him this. And he says then, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter. He gives him a new name. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. This means he will be protected from making those errors because he's being backed by heaven. We recognize this as him being made the first pope. So he's being given this infallibility from making a doctrinal mistake. But then immediately after that, the very, very next verse, after Christ tells him to not tell everybody, Peter then says, Jesus says we must go to Jerusalem, and he has to suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Well, Peter, just having been told he has this grace now, he rebukes Jesus, saying, far be it from you, Lord. This shall never happen to you. But Jesus turns to Peter and says, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. So in one scene, we see he's being given this grace to be protected from doctrinal error. But in the very next verse, he said, but you are still subject to sin. You are still subject to seeing things wrong. And we see the same thing today in our popes. Our popes are held to the same standards as everybody else, but we are a church that is being led by a living person on earth. And because of that, and because we've been sustained for 2,000 years, we understand that the Pope has this particular grace. But it's used very, very rarely and should never be thought that we somehow worship the Pope or we venerate him. We see him as our leader who is protected by a special grace. Thanks a lot.